your company came highly, highly recommended. And I'm like, yeah, we're not messing around. I've heard these horror stories of people who've used these, I don't know, fly-by-night remediators, and it ends up costing them more in the long run. So, we're going to do it right the first time.
My name is Michael Rubino. I'm on a personal mission to make sure you don't get sick inside your own home.
I knew there was something wrong. I'm just so relieved there's something that you can do about it.
Hello, thank you for joining us for another episode of Never Been Sicker. I am your host, Michael Rubino, and today's very special guest is Kathleen. Kathleen, thanks for taking time out of your busy day to be here with us. I'm very excited to talk to you because people do request more conversations around good news. Like, give me success stories of what it looks like to find problems and fix problems, and going through that process, which is a difficult and traumatic experience for many people. And so let's dive in. What were you experiencing that really prompted you to go through this process in the first place?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, because I think you're right. I think sometimes you hear so many stories and it feels like, oh my gosh, this is all doom and gloom, but it isn't. But you're also right that it does feel, in the beginning especially, stressful, a little traumatic to go through it. But my, short story was I had Lyme and Bartonella. That brought on autoimmune condition called Myasthenia Gravis. So my doctor, over the years, this had been 5 years ago when this was diagnosed, treated it, was getting quite a bit better, significantly better, but I still wasn't 100%. Right. So he said, let's test you for mold. So thankful. I thought, they're not going to find anything. I don't have mold in my house. Like, what is this guy talking about? Sure enough, came back. He did the mycotoxin test, came back quite high for some of the most common mold species. So then we go down that rabbit hole. Okay, how do we find the mold? What do we do? Where do we go from here? And that's your initial dose of overwhelm, because you don't even know, okay, so what does this look like? What do we do? So the first thing we did was the doctor recommended a mold dog, where you have a dog come into the house that sniffs for mold. That confirmed. Let me backtrack first. Actually, the mold dog came out first. Realized, okay, we have mold, but then you're left feeling like, and where is it? We're not going to go tear apart all the walls in the house to find this. So then the mold dog owner recommended doing an ERMI dust test. So we did that, which confirmed, okay, yes. And we have a 2-story house. So I did one for the upper level, one for the lower level. Confirmed, yes, you definitely have mold. Here's what kind you have. But then again, it's the question, okay, so now what? So the next step was bringing in a very well-known and respected mold inspector.
Right.
And then from there, yes, that's super helpful, although again, overwhelming and stressful to find out where it is, how bad it is. But the good news too with that was they gave us a prioritized list of, okay, here's the worst part. So basically in tiers. Tier, 1 is, this is the most urgent. Get to this now. So once we had all that, we had the report, your company came highly, highly recommended. And I'm like, yeah, we're not messing around. I've heard these horror stories of people who've used these, I don't know, fly-by-night remediators, and it ends up costing them more in the long run. So, we're going to do it right the first time. So that led us to you. This was back in February that we had it done, the remediation.
Okay, and we're here. It's June, so a couple months later.
Yeah.
So I want to backtrack a little bit, just to extract a little bit more from the kind of the initial experience of using the mold dog and stuff like that. All right, so just to give clarity, the mold dog, it sounds like there was some value there, but they kind of go in and they sit near where they think there's mold.
And I'll be honest. I came from knowing zero at that time. Looking back, I would not I personally would not recommend a mold dog. I would recommend doing a dust test. So the mold dog, the guy with just like someone can train a dog to sniff out for explosives and drugs, this
Sure.
dog is trained to sniff out mold. So it would alert to, and I think it would, I think it would sit down. I mean, it was in a lot of places, but it was also hitting places like a potted plant. I'm like, okay, clearly that's not where my health problem is. I don't think it's coming from a potted snake plant in my living room,
Right.
So there was a little bit of value in just knowing, okay, there is mold in the house, but you don't know with the mold dog, because even the owner said what he alerts to isn't necessarily what needs to be remediated, because his sense of smell is so sensitive. It will track to like the billionth particle size.
Yeah.
So, but again, my doctor recommended it. Sure. Let's do this. So yeah.
So it's kind of like one of those situations where, if you're willing to kind of open up your entire house like Swiss cheese, because they're going to point to everything. And there's like the problem. And I agree with you in terms of, I think mold dogs have their use. I think that there's some value there, but if it detects 15, 20 different places, there's no data that comes along with that says, all right, focus on these 5 areas, right? Because these are the bad molds. There's a lot of them, right? You have some data points to go after. With the mold dog, it's usually when I've walked into homes where there's been a mold dog, it's like blue tape marks all over the place where they sat down, and it's like, all right, you want me to open up all of this, and what happens if we don't find anything? It becomes a little bit more challenging, but nonetheless, look, you went through that experience. It's helpful for other people listening that might be trying to figure out what experience they want to go through. It's helpful to kind of go through that. And so then you have the dust test, and you just said that you recommend doing dust testing. Full disclosure, I have a test called the dust test, right? But there's also the ERMI, so there's other things. So explain to me what value you got out of kind of moving into those dust testing and getting the ERMIs done.
So yeah, incredibly valuable. So it's like a little Swiffer cloth, and you take it and you dust certain places, ideally the places in your house. And if you're a clean person like I am, I have to let some dust accumulate so we can test. But even getting up above door jambs, places where you don't usually dust like every week. But sending that in and getting an exact printout and breakdown of these are the exact types of mold that were found in that dust cloth, that was really helpful.
Did you see a correlation between the toxins in your body and the molds that were elevated on the dust sample?
A couple of them, yes. And I know you probably talked to a lot of people who had the mycotoxin test, right? It's a urine test.
Yep.
That, pulls it out of your body. But there were plenty on there that said, oh, this is probably from a food. I'm like, well, I hardly ever eat that food. So I don't know that that's true. So yes and no. There was some conflicting information, but then some that did correlate to what the dust test showed.
That's good. Yeah, of course, there could have been previous exposures and stuff that just wasn't getting released from your body or what have you. But it is usually interesting because I always see a pretty decent correlation. And yeah, I've heard the argument that some of these things come from food. Look. Air transmission is one of the greatest routes of exposure, right? Yeah. If you've got mold in your place and that mold is capable of producing certain toxins, the likelihood of those toxins getting inhaled, pretty strong likelihood, right? Especially taking 20,000 breaths per day, especially with modern homes and the amount of air exchange from indoors to outdoors. There's a pretty high likelihood. Of course, there's exposure with food, and we understand that because the FDA tries to regulate mycotoxins in our food supply. How well of a job they do, who knows? But that's where a lot of our mycotoxin data comes from, right? The agricultural industries. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting as you kind of tie this all together. But, I personally see a lot of correlation with people. And I think there's a big problem with what we're breathing in. We're just not acknowledging it, so
Yeah.
it's interesting, but
Oh, very much.
good to
Um,
know.
the one thing I was going to say is, yeah, like when my doctor first, confirmed that I had it, I'm like, where's the mold? I have a very, very heightened sense of smell. I'm like, I don't smell anything. I don't smell anything musty. I don't see, and granted, I'm just a layperson. I didn't know what I didn't know, but visually, you couldn't see anything. And we may get to this, but the huge source was up in the attic and the HVAC system, which, of course, like you're never up in your attic. How would you know you've got all these spores blowing down from the HVAC unit that you can't see, you can't smell? Yeah, that was probably like one of the biggest shocks of my entire life, was finding out that we actually
Yeah.
did have mold.
Yeah. So you did the dust testing, that kind of gave you the confirmation you needed, right? To
Yeah, it's
understand.
like the answer you didn't want to get.
Yeah. You didn't want, you got the confirmation you really didn't wish for,
Yeah.
but in hindsight, it actually allowed you to then take steps forward, right? To make
Right.
the improvements you needed to make
Yeah.
to feel the way you want to feel. And that brought you to the step of hiring an inspection company. Now, what was that like? I mean, it could be expensive,
Yeah.
especially I know the companies I recommend, tend to be the more expensive ones, and I know people complain about that. But there's a method to the madness that
Yes.
I'd love to explore with you.
Yeah.
Was there an initial sticker shock when you called them and they told you the pricing and all that stuff?
Yeah, there was. And I will say, just going back like to the mold dog decision, I'm not saying don't do it, but if you're looking at your budget,
Yeah.
that is a consideration, because the mold dog was like $1,400 or $1,500
Wow, that's pretty
versus
expensive.
the dust
Actually.
test was, I don't remember, a few $100s, right? So yeah, spoiler alert, mold inspection, mold remediation is not inexpensive. It's
Right.
It's expensive, but what are you going to do? The option is to leave, blow up the house, or get it done. We decided we were going to get it done. So with the, and even like with HomeCleanse, with you guys, once we knew what was going on, we were able to kind of sort of play with the budget to, basically, okay, here's what needs to be done, but you can pick and choose, okay, where are we going to put this allotted amount of money for whatever this year, for the next 2 years. So you kind of get to decide with that. But yeah, even going through the mold inspection process, they came in, they were amazing. The guy was here for probably 6 hours, super thorough. And then when we had the call afterwards, so again, then you can kind of customize the pricing with that too, based on how many of the tests you want them to send into the lab, like how really, really granular you want them to get. So there is some wiggle room in that with how much. Like for us, we decided, okay, we're not going to go ahead and pay for every single windowsill test. We're going to get an idea with a few of them to know what are we dealing with, rather than doing every single one.
Yeah, and that's smart. I mean, you can kind of economize in this way as long as you can get enough data points, right? So I think I've had many people send me emails. Hey, there's this spreadsheet. Can you help me narrow this down? This is a little more than I wanted to spend. It's like, yeah, absolutely. There are certain ways you can be economical with just getting the right data points to make sure. You just don't want to cut so much out that you get no data to then be able to make conscious decisions from. And I think there's that fine balance. So, it's great. I'm sure, there was some sticker shock and stuff like that you had to overcome. And I'd love to dive into like the mental gymnastics that you have to go through, right? Because you're like trying to really assess the value of all of this as you go through it, and then depending on everybody's in a different relationship, and they have like familial support. Sometimes husbands and wife don't agree or not on the same page with the value, and then there's always the is this going to make a difference, right? Nobody wants to spend a ton of money if it's not going to make a difference, right? And so I think there's a lot of mental gymnastics that go through that. Do you mind sharing some of that and walking
Sure,
us through a bit?
absolutely. It is. It's a lot. You probably hear this all the time. It's a lot to process, and it's a lot to process over weeks and months because you first find out, yes, it's been confirmed. We've got mold. Okay, that's not really what you wanted to hear. And then like, how are we going to budget for this? But luckily, kind of back to what you were saying about other family members in the house. So I was the only one that was having serious enough symptoms. But my husband knew, like, okay, like whatever we need to do to figure this out, of course. Um, but it's weird that this is what he was saying. I'm not having any symptoms. I was
Right.
like, well, maybe you are, but maybe you're not realizing that this is what it's from. Maybe over the years, because we never really like truly found the exact source. We had leaks over the years that were just quote unquote repaired. So likely that's probably what it was from as far as the attic. And then that moisture and everything getting into the HVAC unit. Um, and I would tell him because I was like digging in deep, learning as much as I could about this. And thank you so much for your podcast and all your social media. I've learned so much from you, knowing that maybe it's not affecting you, but maybe it is. Oh yeah, I'm sure it's fine. It was like 2 weeks later after that conversation, my husband found out he had Hashimoto's
Oh, wow.
thyroiditis, which is apparently one of the top autoimmune conditions associated with mold, illness, and mycotoxins. So, right?
Yeah.
So that was kind of crazy. So yeah, luckily, like very, very fortunate. He was totally on board. Yeah. If we have mold, obviously we have to find it and get rid of it. And then the more I'm learning about like the other serious health implications, like cardiovascular disease, like so many things, like this isn't optional. We just need to get it fixed, like whatever it takes. It's not really optional.
Yeah, no, and you had the right viewpoint and strategy, and obviously super lucky that your husband was on board and understood. And I hate to hear that he got diagnosed with Hashimoto's, but at least now he's got some answers. It's interesting.
Right.
I was just talking to Dr. Scott McMahon recently, and he was sharing that a lot of guys don't really display symptoms despite having all the biomarkers and signs of certain illnesses. I'll give you a good example. Like he diagnosed me with SEERS. Right. And so I've got the four biomarkers that give you the knowledge essentially that you have SEERS. Mm-hmm. And, he's like asking me, hey, have you, he's been asking me all these like medical questions. Have you noticed this and the other thing? And I was like, not really, but, maybe I've been urinating a little more frequently. Maybe I've been waking up a little more tired than usual, and he's like, well, you get exposed as a kid, right? You've been going into buildings for the past 10 years, known moldy buildings. I think it's finally caught up with you. And I'm like, wow, interesting. Because I don't feel sick.
Right.
But,
right.
and he's like, we don't know exactly why, but for some reason, like the men seem to either not notice their symptoms as much, which is true for me. I guess like if I'm really reflecting, I'm noticing some changes, but also like it's like they don't like the women seem to be the canaries in the coal mine for the whole family.
Yeah.
It's been interesting to really see that. And I've seen the patterns unfold, but it's also interesting to get these confirmations from other doctors that what they're seeing. Because I think it's really important to know that because, if we're in moldy environments and, the women aren't feeling well, that's the warning sign, right? Like we're affected. It's clear that I've been affected. Yeah. I haven't, even though I haven't maybe had the onset of symptoms, right? It's one of those interesting things. So I'm so glad that your husband got on board,
Sometimes it's so gradual. You almost don't even notice. You think, oh, it's just, I'm getting older. Like you just chalk. And that's what I told him. I go, like, you may be having some things going on from this, but it's so gradual, and you're just chalking it up to, oh well, I'm getting older. It is what it is,
Yeah.
and sometimes, okay, that is it.
Yeah.
But then I know one of the other challenges too is finding a doctor. Like I would just if you can, find a functional medical doctor or naturopathic doctor in your area, because most mainstream doctors aren't going to know anything about this.
No.
And that's another challenge. Luckily, I had already been seeing a rheumatologist who was knowledgeable about this.
That point you in the right direction.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
So then the remediation, right? So you go through this remediation. Obviously, it's not easy to go through. I mean, just soup to nuts. You got to move out, right? There's a lot of logistics. You got to find all these different people, good remediator, good contractor, good HVAC guy, right? There's a couple moving parts to this, which could be overwhelming for anybody. I know that my goal was to create a company that tried to make the process as easy as possible. So it's overwhelming. It's a difficult process. Trying to make it as easy as possible. Try to help meet people where they're at, right? And that's where the customization kind of came into play. What was that process like for you? Did it help? Did it make it seem easier? And how did you go through the mental gymnastics of all that overwhelm?
Yeah, there was a lot to that too. So we had to be out of the house and compared to what some people go through, I think we lucked out. Ended up being like 5.5 days. So we were kind of joking, okay, this is our staycation. We stayed like at an Airbnb, maybe 5 miles from where we live. So that was convenient. It wasn't that big of a deal. But yeah, finding the other people, the other pieces of the puzzle. Okay, we need someone to come. We need new HVAC units. We need new duct work. We need all new vents. We need, people to come into. So the 3 places we did, so the attic, because there was black mold up there, and then the whole entire HVAC system, then the water heater platform in the garage, and then up in our laundry room there was a little bit in there too. So there were a lot of moving pieces. So luckily my husband helped. I said, okay, we're gonna divide and conquer. Here's what I'm taking care of. I'm gonna handle this. You do this. So I, gave him a checklist. Here's what we need to do. Like, am I missing anything? So it was nice to tag team it a bit, knowing, hey, you're responsible for this. I'm responsible for this. We would check. Okay, so is this set up? Okay, when are they coming? Okay. And there were times like, oh, nope, they can't come tomorrow. Okay, then we had to bump the other people back, right? So things always happen.
Right.
But we developed a checklist. So we knew everything that needed to be done and when, because obviously no one can come into the house while the remediation is done. So you have to wait until that's all done.
Right.
Then we have the post-remediation inspection done to make sure that was all clear. And then it's like, okay, reassemble time. Let's put this back together.
How was that process? So the remediation about 5.5 days.
Yeah.
How long did it take to put things back together?
Well, good and bad. It's kind of like childbirth. It's kind of a blur, but I want to say, and we were able to move back in during that time, but to get like everything done, it was another 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah. But at least you were able to move in and
So the first thing we did, so we live in Southern California. This was, technically in the winter, but it was February. So, we lived without, this is one thing too. We had our inspection done the end of October. The middle of November is when we got the results. And it was like, oh my gosh, do not touch. We can't run the HVAC. So there's not going to be any heat in the house until this is done. So the first thing we had to do, okay, we have to have hot water. So we made sure the next day, top priority was getting the water heater platform rebuilt, reconnect that so we can have hot water to take showers. But yeah, luckily, knock on wood, that we do live in Southern California, because not having heat, like, it wasn't great, but not like living in New York or something.
Yeah, wasn't comfortable, but your house didn't freeze, so there was at least safe.
Okay, one thing I did want to mention, and I don't know if you're thinking about touching on this, but I will say, what was helpful, once we realized, okay, we've got mold and it's not good. I knew we needed to just like dilute as much of the air as we could. So by that, until we had it remediated, we're like, hey, we're living here. It's not so bad that we can't stay here. Let's, open the windows when we can. We got air purifiers. We were running those. And what was interesting is one of the markers that my doctor ran for me to coincide with the mycotoxin test is called TGF beta 1, trans growth factor beta 1. That's a kind of a proxy marker for inflammation, can be related to mold. So he ran that and it was high. It was like 35,000. He's like, yeah, this is a problem. It should
Mine's
be
like 14,000 or something like that.
Yeah, it should be like under 5.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so even by keeping the windows open as much as we could, running the air purifiers, keeping dust to an absolute minimum, that 35,000 came down to about 14,000. So it came down significantly in a period of a couple of months. Didn't mean my body wasn't burdened with mycotoxins. Didn't mean the mold wasn't still a problem, but we were able to at least bring it down a little bit just by doing, 2 to 3 easier things.
Yeah. That is definitely a smart thing. It's the solution to pollution is dilution, right? So we can dilute in the interim. We're going to make improvements. It's one of these crazy things where it's like, once we kind of know, like we're dealing in a problem, like, we sometimes fear kicks in, sometimes like that fight or flight response kicks in and you're just like, I need to get out of here. Right. Got to remember we've been living here, right, this whole time. So how do we make things better? Because when we start to make rash decisions, that's where we make mistakes. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think the best thing to do is like, let's start opening windows. Let's start getting some air purifiers going. Let's start like taking decisive action that makes things more palatable. So like we have the time to make the right decisions. Because that's what we're trying to buy time at that point. So we're trying to figure out what is the right move here.
Right.
Because otherwise you start calling, the Serve Pros of the world, the people that really don't know what they're doing from a health perspective, that are more doing this from a cosmetic perspective. And then you start going down the wrong path. And then, so it's good that it's good to, just take a deep breath, make the right decisions, start to improve the environment so that you just buy yourself more time. Because you think about it, you've been living in this area, but you haven't been opening the windows, right? Everything's been closed up, right? And there are certain things happening that like, for example, you said we're turning the HVAC off. You need a problem in the HVAC. That makes a world of difference, right? Because now you're not circulating those particles that are coming off the coil and the ductwork, et cetera, throughout the house. Massive improvement just turning that thing off. And so there are things you can do to make improvements before you kind of, just start to cut and run, which I think is really smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
So after the remediation, right? Yeah. After the reconstruction, first off, my hat's off to you to live through the construction aspect inside, because that can be, that dusty drywall mess can be a bit of a bear to deal with, but
it's all part of the adventure. No,
it's all part of the adventure.
And ours, luckily, knock on wood, it could have been so much worse. I've heard way worse stories. So, but after the remediation, then you're kind of left with, okay, so, because you don't want to replace any furniture before the remediation. So then we're looking at, okay, what do we need to replace? So, and you may have a different recommendation, but again, let me get, and maybe you have these, I don't know, the plates, what is it? What are they made with? Like that jelly kind of stuff?
Like the agar plates?
Yeah. The agar plates. Oh boy, that's a rude awakening too. So we're thinking, okay, most likely, because you look at where your AC vents are, okay, they're right over the furniture there. And we have carpet. Part of our downstairs is carpet, part of it's tile. So I ended up testing because I told my husband, okay, it's great we got this done, but I got to talk to you about something else. There's a good chance we need to replace a lot of stuff in the house. So tested the furniture, tested the sofas and the carpet, the bedding. So a lot of that came back very, very high mold count. So long story short on that, we ended up replacing basically anything that was a porous surface. So sofas, we tested our mattress. Luckily, our mattress was like very, very, very low.
Great.
But the kids' mattress says, okay, yeah, we got to replace those. So there was a lot we replaced. We would have, again, this is looking at budget. I would have loved to have ripped everything out and put down new Tyler wood floor. It was not in the budget. So we replaced carpet with carpet. And new furniture too. So that definitely.
Well, listen, in a few years, you recoup. If you want to replace the carpet and put, wood floor or vinyl, you've got that option, right?
Yeah,
at least you've got rid of the stuff that was harboring, the stuff that you don't want to be breathing in. So I think that was a smart maneuver. I am in the camp of test, don't guess. Mm-hmm. So I love that you tested your, these expensive contents because
otherwise you cleaned all this stuff up, but then you're really still living in it.
Totally. Every time you sit on your couch and it plops up, right? Unfortunately.
You cover yourself with that blanket, or it's like, oh, you're just like draping yourself.
I had a post once talking about like fabric couches and how they can, harbor, different particles like a sponge. And every time you sit down, unfortunately, it's like a plume cloud that you can't see. They're just tiny, tiny particles. Yeah. And, and people were commenting like, haven't you heard of a vacuum? You don't vacuum your stuff. And it's like, we're talking about really tiny particles that get embedded into the fibers and it's the force of sitting down on it that allows these things to really push up. And it's things that are so small that bypass the fabric, get into the cushion, right? Yeah. And then when you're actually sitting down, the force of your body pushing down on the couch causes this stuff to come up. And that's when you start to not feel well. You start to get re-exposed to whatever is in the couch. Same thing with the mattress, right? And the mattress has this added issue of we sweat in our sleep. Unavoidable. Yeah. Now you're adding more moisture to it, which is, kind of making the problem worse. You have the bacteria and stuff from.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you something, or here's something I want to talk about because it has come up and I know you hear this all the time, but I think it's really important to address. Recently, even my husband's doctor, and he's more of an integrative doctor, said, well, mold has been around forever. It's really not that big of a deal. When he told me his doctor said that, my head just spun. It's one thing if a friend or someone says it because they don't know any better. And so would you like to talk? So my response was to this person. It was actually a family member. And I basically said, well, yes, that's true. Mold has always been in existence. However, it depends on the concentration of it. If it's outside and you're out for a walk, that's different, right? It's about kind of like you're saying about the dilution of the pollution. It's always been around, but when it's in your house and you're breathing it in and it's toxic black mold. So I was just like, okay, but I know most people, I had no idea before this whole.
I'm sure in the beginning of the asbestos battle, they said asbestos has been around forever. Or in the middle of the lead battle, lead's been around forever, right? Yeah. Why all of a sudden is it making us sick? And it's just because it's been around forever doesn't mean that it's not a problem. Right. Just because mold in houses is normal doesn't mean that normal isn't a problem. Right. We normalize these things and then we think that it's okay. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really the real danger zone of kind of where we're at. There's a mold remediation protocol in Leviticus in the Bible, in the Old Testament. And it's literally like, if you read it, it's interesting because they would essentially clean it have somebody come and bless it. But if it came back, they would tear down the houses and carry the stones away and dump them outside the village.
Yeah.
Right. So they knew it was a problem.
Right.
And it was like, well, they would try to scrub it and basically pray,
Yeah.
and if it came back, they knew it was, that's it. There was nothing they can do. They had to tear it down. Right. And so, it's like, we've known that it's been a problem for thousands of years. Why would we tear down buildings, thousands of years ago if it wasn't a problem, if people weren't getting sick? Right.
Yeah.
So I think, it's just, we've got short-term memory.
Yeah.
The mold is literally in the 90s, right? Like, there was cases, there was hundreds of millions of dollars of lawsuits. People died. Like, we understood. That's where we really started to understand kind of like in recent modern history that mold's a massive issue. As so much so that we had the Melinda Ballard case in 2001, which literally was the catalyst for insurance companies, home insurance companies, starting to exclude mold coverage.
Wow.
Like, literally in the 80s and 90s, if you had mold, you had coverage up to your policy limit. There was never like, let's see, was it Tuesday when the leak happened? Oh, sorry. We only covered if it was Wednesday.
Yep.
It's like, we have all these nuances that started to happen because people started to get sick, huge liabilities, right? And it just became like a high payout for all these insurance companies. So they just changed the rules. And
for the most part, it's spoiler alert. It wasn't covered in our house either.
But spoiler alert, it's almost never covered. I had it literally, a hurricane came through and I had water damage and it was like $20,000 worth of damage. I called them. Spoiler alert, they wouldn't cover it. They said, well, did a tree fall through the house and cause a hole to go into the house? No, it didn't. Okay, well, that would have needed to happen first for it to trigger coverage.
God.
I was like, wow, so we don't do wind-driven rain anymore? And it was like, sir, if you read page 172 of your policy.
Fine. Oh, sorry, I missed that.
It's like, really? Okay, great. And it was like, I know this stuff. I like went through with the broker and was like, I didn't go through 172 pages, and nobody does. But I was like, hey, we do have cover for water damage, right? We do have cover for mold, right? No, I had coverage. It's just the trigger for coverage didn't trigger. So it's just one of these really funny things where it's like they make it impossible.
So next time you'll know, you're having a bad storm, go down and cut down a tree.
Oh, I know. It's like literally next time I have to just have trees nearby so they have to fall through the house. It's one of these things where it's frustrating. And I know I'm singing to the choir here because it's frustrating for all of us. Like it happens to me, happened to you, you got denied. Sure. 99% of the people I talk to out there in the world always get denied, right? And it's very rare that people are covered. I mean, it's like a miracle. And that's part of the problem. We have the societal issues that we experience don't help either, right? So when we have doctors out there that are like, well, mold's everywhere, mold's no big deal, mold can't be causing this. It's like, cool. Let me send you the NIH paper, the updated NIH papers that talk about the effects that mold has on the human body, because you should know that. Now, just because there's an NIH paper doesn't mean that doctors are out there reading it, right? And to make matters worse, just because there's an NIH paper doesn't mean that the CDC and the EPA have updated their websites to coincide with the NIH research.
Oh, yeah.
It's actually something that we're asking Congress to do. It's going to be part of the recommendations that I somehow got roped into providing some recommendations for the new administration regarding mold coverage, which is nice to see that they're asking about mold. So it's good. I mean, I don't want to make any crazy promises because I think we've got a long way to go, but at least we're starting to open the door and starting to have these conversations. But one of the things that I'm recommending is, hey, why don't we update EPA, CDC, and NIH to all be on the same page? Because if you go to the CDC website, they'll say, hey, you could use bleach. It's fine, right?
Oh.
If you go to the EPA's website, they'll say, please don't use bleach, right? And then if you go to the NIH website, there's just no recommendation.
Yeah.
But it's like, how can we just get on the same page
Right.
so that all the Department of Health websites for every state inside the US is speaking the same language.
Yeah.
And then if they are, then it becomes a lot easier to show your doctor, hey, doc, did you read the NIH paper? Let me send this to you.
Right.
But until we start to kind of have that societal shift, we get these situations where, your husband goes to the doctor and they're talking about your story and the doctor's like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. That doesn't happen.
Right.
Yeah, that's that other argument of like, well, mold is everywhere. It's unavoidable. It's like, well, first off, it's everywhere it's growing. It has to be growing for it to be everywhere. Right? It's not like it's not ubiquitous like God, guys. It's everywhere that it's growing. Mm-hmm. That's why I hate that word ubiquitous, because it's just not an accurate statement. Mm-hmm. But where we get concerned about it is if it's overgrowing, right? Just like anything else, we have viruses in our bodies right now. We have bacteria in our bodies right now. Heck, we have mold in our bodies right now. But if we have an overgrowth of these things, then we have an issue, right? And so it's about controlling that growth. So we don't want to be scared of mold to this level where we don't want to go outside. Yeah. Hello, we feel good outside, right? Mm-hmm. We don't want to get scared of mold to the point where we will never go to the grocery store again. But we just want to control our environment so that they don't grow out of control. And I think that's a really important thing. I mean, that's where it's like the dose makes the poison. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we have to understand that aspect. Now, once we get sick, we can get sensitized. And then the dose makes the poison goes out the window. But that's a whole other discussion. Yeah. And I think it's really important that we have to understand we want to be in control of these things. And as long as we have doctors doing what they're doing, and it's like your husband's not alone. I mean, if I hear this every day, I mean, it's crazy.
Oh, I know. It's very frustrating.
Yeah.
Well, another thing that's hard too is there's such a plethora of symptoms. It's not like, oh, you've got these 4 symptoms. Oh, you've got mold illness. You've got mycotoxins. It affects. Yeah. Right. So I didn't get Hashimoto's, but my husband did. For my daughter, when she lived here, she has since, graduated college and doesn't live here. But now looking back, her symptoms were more, we just thought, oh gosh, you're always getting a cold, right? It was more of like the sinusy, phlegmy kind of thing. So my son, nothing. So everybody's different. You're living in the same exact house, the same stuff going on, symptoms totally different.
Yeah. And that does make it difficult, but I've got a great answer for that one. Cause I get that question all the time. Well, we don't have the same symptoms, so therefore there's no way we have mold, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, well, did you ever get COVID? And people are like, well, yeah, I got COVID. Okay. Yeah, right. Let me tell you a story about how me and my wife got COVID. Yeah. Okay. Me and my wife got COVID in 2020. And it was very interesting because I was laid up in bed for about 4 days straight, while my wife was not only walking around the house, she was working out every single day, like as if nothing happened. Okay.
You're like, I hate you.
Yeah, it was really fun. Mm-hmm. And she was like,
she can take care of you.
She was like, you're a baby. Get your shit together, right? So no, she didn't. But it was like, it was so interesting. And she lost her sense of taste and smell, and I didn't. Yeah, like. Right. I felt like crap. I was in bed, it felt like I had the flu basically. I was in bed and I was like dying in bed, but I could eat and taste the food. Yeah. I could, and so it was, but she couldn't. Right. And so my point of that whole story is it was 2 people. We definitely got the same strain. We were in the same places, but yet we had different symptoms. And I think it's like people have to understand that, we're all exposed to the same viruses and the same bacteria, even the same molds, but we're going to have different reactions, right? Why is that? Because we have different genetics. We have different epigenetics. We've been exposed to different things in our lives, right? And things are going to, our illnesses are going to show up differently. Yes, even in the same house, even exposed to the same things.
People have different pathogens. Okay, do you have the Epstein-Barr virus? For me, I already had Lyme. So then, okay, the more compromised your system is in some way, it's just going to attack, I think, must be like your weakest spot. Totally.
And it's interesting, like Dr. Jill Krista has been doing a study, the Mold IQ study, and she's been, we only have data off of like 500 people so far. There might be updates since we last spoke to her, but about 500 people, and they're asking symptoms. So These are people that have known mold exposure and they're asking about the symptoms. And every single symptom is like 3%. So it's not like there's one symptom that stands out amongst all the symptoms. Every single symptom is like 2 to 3%, which means that everyone's being exposed, but they're displaying different symptoms. Now, that tells me pretty obviously that it's very difficult to diagnose, because it's not like you have this standout symptom. I mean, if you go to WebMD right now and you're like, here are the symptoms I have, it's like, good. Well, you could have these 5 different things, right? Maybe you're dying, maybe you're fine.
Right.
These are the 5 different things that you could have based upon the symptoms. You're not going to be able to have that for mold. I mean, we know it, because the difficult thing about mold is one of the biggest things we know about it is it causes inflammation. And then inflammation opens the door to basically any symptom being exposed, right? Because you now have different illnesses that you can be exposed to with your immune system already weakened, right? These other things can kind of take over. So this means that you pretty much can have anything at that point. And that's going to make it difficult to diagnose.
Not only that, but I think in my case, it was more, when you look at the list of possible symptoms, well, yeah, maybe, but sometimes it's that you have a autoimmune condition or something, they've tried everything and you're not getting better. I would look at the possibility of mold.
Yep.
It's very, so what is it? What are the most recent stats? Is it 50% of homes have some level of mold?
So it's 50% of homes have 50% of homes have visible signs of water damage.
Okay.
And 80% of those homes have visible signs of mold. That's visible. Right. So that's what we know.
Right.
Now, how do you define visible? Well, I don't know. I mean, is your attic visible? It depends if you go up in your attic a lot, right?
Technically, yes. But a lot of people I know, like for us in SoCal, most people you use your attic, unless you're paying for storage off site, you're using, and luckily we didn't have that much up there. That's why they were able to find it pretty easily. But a lot of people store their stuff up in the attic. It's up there. You're dark. You're not looking around for mold. So. Yeah. But now that I know what I know, like if we were to ever buy another house, I'll be looking at it very differently.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you're educated now. You've gone through it, right? So you're definitely going to look at it in a different lens.
Kind of like everything you wanted to not know about mold, and now you know.
Yeah.
But I'm glad we know what we know now.
But here's the thing, like the reason a lot of us are in the situations we're in is because we didn't know much about it. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, I know it's a gift and a curse to go through these types of things, but when you come out the other side, you're more knowledgeable, right? You're going to be, you're more in control of your health. You're more in control of your house's health, because you know these things now. It's like you have to kind of go through some dark periods to get through the other side of the tunnel and see the light at the end of the tunnel. Right. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing about this is, like, when we talk about visible, like, was your laundry room visible? Like, did you just see mold on the wall?
No. So in the laundry room, it was in the cabinet underneath the sink. All that was visible was like a little water stain. Didn't even have. So up above, like where you're setting things down, there was just a water stain. But then underneath, there was mold. So we couldn't see it because it was hidden.
So, does that makes the argument, well, what about all the stuff that is invisible?
Right.
And then it just depends on who you talk to. You have some people that are in this camp of like, well, if you can't see it, it can't hurt you. Well, I wish that were true, but that's not so true. And so then it just goes, well, how skewed are these numbers? Right? Because if we're 50% have signs of water damage and 80% of those have visible mold, then what about all the stuff that is invisible, right? That you don't see, that's hidden behind a wall, hidden in an HVAC somewhere. That's not part of those statistics. So it's the real number is somewhere between 50% and above, right? That much we know.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
So
I
if you're
mean, that's
sitting, yeah, if you're listening to this, you're thinking, I wonder, uh, order, get Michael's dust test because
get the
it's
dust up.
fairly inexpensive. And then you're gonna know. And sometimes it's almost like, well, I don't want to go to the doctor because I don't want to know. Right? The same with the mold. Oh, I don't want to know.
I
But
don't know.
trust me, you do want to know. You do want to know.
If you walk out your front door, it's either you or it's your neighbor, right?
Yeah.
I don't like those odds. So it's better to know than not know, because if you're
Right.
dealing with sort of health issues, right, it's better to be able to rule these things out and take control over these things. So let's talk about that for a minute. So what sort of benefits have you noticed so far?
Let's see. So since we had this done in February, I'm still working on detoxing, right? That's the thing, depending on what type of mycotoxins you have, a different detox protocol. So we're working on that. My TGF beta 1 numbers are continuing to come down. So that means my inflammation is continuing to
Amazing.
come down.
So measurable
So,
results.
Yeah. So that's, to me, okay, that's huge. I just feel better, like just mentally feel better being in the house, knowing that source, that huge source is gone. It's just very like reassuring.
Amazing.
No, okay, we're not like breathing this in, whether you're running the AC or the heat or the fan. Like, just now looking back, it's like, oh my gosh, like that was running, like for how many days, how many hours were we in this toxic soup,
Does it smell different? Like, do you notice like because
I don't know, because we normally being in a warmer climate, we usually have our windows open a lot anyway. So no, but we are still running the air purifiers just as a backup.
Good.
I just think it's good to do, whether not just for mold, but just allergens and dust and stuff like that. So it hasn't been like, oh my gosh, it's been this amazing transformation, because it's a journey. This has been going on in my body for so long. It's a process to get it back. We haven't retested mycotoxins yet. That's going to be next month. So that'll be probably and I know that's a very slow process too, right? It takes a while. It took a while to build up. It's going to take a while to get rid of it.
Absolutely. But you do notice a difference. You don't have buyer's remorse. You're happy you did it.
No. Oh my gosh. So I will say this, we, knock on wood, we're very lucky, but it was also very intentional who we went with, both for the inspection process and for the remediation, because we wanted it done right. We wanted it done right the first time.
Yeah.
And your team was impeccable. Everything from the first phone call to coming out here, giving us an estimate, looking things over, walking us through the process, the 5 days. So what we would do is we're like, okay, we're going to check on the house every day, just to so we would bring the guys lunch every day. So they wouldn't like dread seeing us. We're like, hey, there's a method to our mess. We, bring them pizza. Like, what do you guys want for lunch today? But they were always like so good. Is I don't want to bother you. We don't want to come in, but because, oh no, you can come in, like kind of peek around the corner and see what. So they were always like so helpful, so informative. Like, we never felt like, we were imposing. Very, very methodical with explaining things. Just, it could not have gone better.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. I mean, I designed the process specifically with people in mind, and it's a traumatic experience, and I wanted it to be comforting. But it's great to hear that like you had such a good experience from start to finish. We're all human beings, right? So we make mistakes, and it doesn't always go as perfect. But of course, just nice to hear that when everything goes according to plan and everything goes perfect, and you have that experience, it's great.
And let's face it, it could not have been super fun to be up on that attic for 5 days.
No.
I think we're all very...
I've been there myself.
I was like, you guys are... At least it wasn't in the heat of the summer. You guys are amazing. Like,
at least it's February.
Yeah.
Imagine being up in the attic in the middle of June in the middle of
I
Tampa,
can't.
Florida.
I can't.
Happens.
Like, we have to be really nice to these guys because, they're doing a really good job, and, we feel bad that they're kind of cramped up in this little space. So,
No, that's
it
great.
was a A++ experience from start to finish. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So before we go here today, just do you have any words of encouragement for folks, or any knowledge that, like, going through the process and coming out the other side, some things that now, maybe you wish you knew, when you started the journey a few months ago, anything you can share in hindsight that might make it easier for somebody who's probably at the beginning of stages of things, that it's about to go through the process, that might be helpful for them?
Yeah. Well, number one, it's not fun. That's for sure. But so probably the big one is, like, if you're at the very, very start of this and you're even wondering, could my symptoms be mold related? Find a functional medical doctor who is well versed in mold. Like, that's number one, no question. Because most mainstream doctors aren't going to know anything about it. Nothing against them. They do what they do, but most of them don't know anything about mold. The second thing would be, especially from a cost perspective, do a dust test. If you have 2 stories, I would recommend, and Michael, you can yay or nay this. We wanted to know, because I was hoping, okay, if we do have mold, hopefully maybe it's only in one level. So I didn't want to do one test and have it, muddy the water. Okay, is it upstairs or downstairs? So if you have a 2-story, I would do 2 dust tests. That way, for sure.
Yeah,
Is it in
I
both
agree
places?
with that.
For us, it was in both places. Those are probably the 2 main things. And don't cut corners. Go with and I don't even know, Michael, if you have any on your website, any recommendations for the inspectors, but it's very important. Both things, the right inspection company and the right remediation company, will make a world of difference. Because if you have, say, a quote unquote inspector come in and they're just doing like an air sample in the middle of the room saying, oh no, you're fine, that's not the correct way
Totally.
to do an inspection. They're going to be like drilling some little holes in your wall. They're going to be doing like the infrared or whatever they use, someone should be in your house for a few hours.
Yeah, you said it best. 6 hours they were in your house. I mean, that's a detailed inspection. Unfortunately, I can count on one hand, people that I would have in my own home. There's 50,000 companies out there. So, like, that tells you the quality is not great, unfortunately.
Do you have a list on your website?
Totally. Yeah, we have a list on our website, and you can.
So you want me to say who we used?
Sure.
I'm pretty sure it's on your website. We Inspect.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. I'm sure the other ones are good too. Go to Michael's website, because you don't want to mess around with this, because here's what can happen. Oh, we found this one spot. We think it's in this wall. Okay, they rip out that wall, but then come to find out it's in every other wall in that room. Yep. So you just spent that money and really didn't even fix anything. Yeah, I mean, there's no way to, I guess the silver lining is you will, at the end of this, be in a much healthier environment. And that was what we were. I mean, there were days I was crying. I'll be honest. It just is overwhelming from a cost perspective, from just logistics, all the pieces, depending on how extensive your project is. It's a lot, but you know what? Feel the feels. It's okay. And know that on the other side, it's only going to help you feel better. Because let's be honest. If mold didn't cause health problems, no one would feel the need to remediate.
Absolutely.
Right. So most people who are having this done have a serious enough health problem that is prompting them to go down this rabbit hole. And it is a rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah.
But
I think you can't. It's hard to heal when you're living inside the problem.
Right. Yeah.
That's a harsh reality, but it's important to kind of, if you don't confront that harsh reality, then you get stuck.
Yep. Exactly. So the good news is, like, I'm so thankful for you and your company, honestly, because I felt such confidence knowing. So if you go up into our attic, it looks pristine up there. So like everything was, they used the surfactant, they, cleaned everything out. And it looks, everyone that goes up, oh my gosh, what you did your attic? I'm like, I know, right? And then it's, painted over with the coating that
The antimicrobial, yeah.
prevents the regrowth. And so yeah, that was my main reason for wanting to come on to share a little of my story, to thank you personally for what you and your company do, because it really does make a difference for people. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And honestly, it's so, I know that, I know you're talking about HomeCleanse and all that, and that's really exciting to hear, just because it's part of my personal mission. But honestly, the whole reason we're on this podcast and the whole point of this podcast, it's not just to get more business, right? It's to really show people, like, this is the process. This is what the process should look like. And there are different paths you can take to go on this process. There's just, when you go off the beaten path and you take air samples in the center of the room, you're not going to get the data you need. If you don't hire the right person to actually address your house, someone who really cares, and it's not just me who cares, you could feel that the guys cared, right? Like that care has been trained and ingrained from me through every single person in this company.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes to make sure that you're actually going to have a good outcome, right? And I think just, it's important to go through that, and like understanding the trials and tribulations, right? Like from the doctors and not getting the answers you need there, to finally finding the right doctors, which that's its own challenge, right? And
oh yeah,
the ebbs and flows of this, and then getting the other side, and then all the people that are wondering, is it even worth it? Mm-hmm. And it's important to kind of go through that. Like, I'm so glad it was worth it for you, and I'm so glad you're noticing benefits right away, and you're seeing measurable results in your lab work. Like, that's really important. And honestly, so many people, whether they hire me or we inspect or anybody else, they just need to know that this journey is worth it. Mm-hmm. Because ignoring it and sticking your head in the sand, it's not. And it causes you to live inside the problem and stay there and be stuck, spinning your wheels and, dealing with health issues. And so I'm just so fortunate that, you wanted to share your story, because I know it's going to help people.
I hope so. Yeah. Yeah. And I can relate too. I know it was the 10th doctor I went to that found out that, like, what my overall problem was. So I know what that's like too. It's a lot.
Oh yeah.
It's a lot, right? You're managing your health and your issues. And, if you have younger kids, like taking care of your family, it's a lot.
Yeah.
But, like what's the option? Is to take it one day at a time, one project at a time, and you'll get through it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here with us and sharing your story. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you soon.
All right. Take care.